A millionaire left his wife, calling her infertile. For years later, he found her with twins. And before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories like this. Enjoy the story. Ethan Lockwood leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the Manhattan skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. The city buzzed below, alive with ambition and chaos, much like the man himself. Ethan was a self-made millionaire, a man who thrived on control, precision, and results. Yet tonight, as the rain streaked the glass and the whiskey in his hand swirled untouched, he felt an emptiness he couldn't ignore. The memory struck him without warning. Claire's tear-streaked face as she stood in the doorway of their former home, her voice trembling with disbelief. "You're really leaving," she had whispered, her hands clenched into fists. After everything, Ethan had kept his face blank, steeling himself against the pain in her eyes. "I can't do this anymore, Claire. I need a family, and you can't give me that." The words echoed in his mind now, as sharp as the night he'd said them. Back then, they had felt justified, rational even. They had tried for years to have a child. Specialists, treatments, endless tests, all to hear the same verdict. It was unlikely they'd ever have children. For Ethan, it had felt like a door slamming shut on the future he'd envisioned. Instead of staying and facing the disappointment, he'd chosen to walk away. The scotch burned his throat as he took a sip, the heat doing little to quell the chill in his chest. He had told himself for years that leaving Claire had been the right decision for both of them. She deserved someone who could love her unconditionally, even if she couldn't give him the family he wanted. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had left because it was easier to blame her than face his own fears of inadequacy. Across town, in a modest apartment far removed from the opulence of Ethan's life, Claire Lockwood stood in her tiny kitchen, packing lunches by the soft glow of the overhead light. The hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic patter of rain on the window were the only sounds in the room. On the counter beside her, two colorful backpacks sat waiting, each with a neatly folded note tucked inside. "You've got this. Love, Mom," the notes read in her familiar handwriting. Claire paused, glancing at the framed photo perched by the window. Two bright-eyed children smiled back at her, their curly hair wild and their grins wide. Liam and Ella, her miracles. They were the reason she got up every morning, the reason she worked long hours at the local bookstore and spent her nights sewing costumes for school plays. They were her everything. As she placed the lunches into the backpacks, a knock at the door startled her. She rarely had visitors, especially at this hour. Wiping her hands on a dish towel, she opened the door cautiously. "Claire," said the familiar voice of Lauren, her oldest friend. She stood drenched on the doorstep, her umbrella forgotten at her side. "Lauren, what's going on?" Claire asked, stepping aside to let her in. Lauren hesitated, her expression a mix of concern and urgency. "I know it's late, but I had to tell you something. It's about Ethan." Claire's breath caught. She hadn't heard that name in years, not since the day he left her standing in the ruins of their marriage. "What about him?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "He's back in town," Lauren said, pulling off her soaked jacket. "I saw him this afternoon near Central Park. He looked different. Older, maybe, but still the same Ethan." Claire turned away, busying herself with the backpacks to avoid meeting Lauren's gaze. "That doesn't matter anymore. He made his choice." "Claire," Lauren's voice softened. "He doesn't know, does he? About Liam and Ella." Claire's hands froze mid-motion. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. "No," she said quietly, "and he doesn't need to. He gave up that right when he left." Lauren sighed, her concern evident. "I get it, Claire. I really do. But what if he finds out? You know how persistent he can be." Claire finally turned to face her, her expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "If he wanted to be a part of my life, he wouldn't have walked away. I've raised those kids on my own, and I won't let him waltz back in and disrupt everything we've built. They're happy, Laura. They don't need him. Lauren nodded reluctantly, sensing the finality in Claire's tone. Just be careful, okay? If he's back, it's only a matter of time before your paths cross. As Lauren left, Claire locked the door behind her, her mind racing. She glanced at the photo of Liam and Ella again, her heart aching with the weight of the secret she had carried for so long. Back in his penthouse, Ethan poured another drink, the rain still drumming against the windows. He couldn't shake the gnawing sense of regret that had settled in his chest. For years, he had buried himself in his work, convincing himself that success could fill the void Claire had left behind. But tonight, the emptiness felt unbearable. He didn't know it yet, but his carefully constructed world was about to be shattered. Fate had a way of uncovering secrets, and the one Claire had kept hidden for 4 years was about to change everything. Ethan Lockwood was a man who thrived on precision. His schedule was meticulously planned, his days structured to the second. Yet, as the morning light seeped through the towering windows of his penthouse, he sat motionless at his dining table, staring at a cold cup of coffee. The city below carried on with its usual rhythm, but for the first time in years, Ethan felt utterly disconnected from it. The events of the previous night replayed in his mind. The memory of Claire's tear-streaked face merged with Lauren's unexpected call. He had spent years burying the remnants of his marriage, convincing himself he'd done the right thing. But now, a nagging question clawed its way into his thoughts. Had he made a mistake? His phone buzzed, pulling him from his trance. It was his assistant. "Your meeting with investors is in an hour, Mr. Lockwood. Shall I send the car?" Ethan hesitated, gripping the edge of the table. "Cancel it," he said abruptly, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. There was a pause on the other end before the assistant replied. "Understood, sir." Ethan ended the call and stood, his reflection catching in the large mirror across the room. The man staring back at him looked every bit the success story. Tailored suit, polished shoes, sharp jawline. Yet his eyes carried a weariness he couldn't ignore. Unable to shake the unease, he found himself walking out of the building and into the crisp autumn air. His feet led him toward Central Park, a place he hadn't visited in years. As he wandered the winding paths, the chatter of children playing tugged at something deep inside him. A boy's laughter rang out, clear and bright, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan's chest tightened. That's when he saw her. Claire was sitting on a bench beneath a canopy of orange and yellow leaves, her face partially obscured by the brim of a hat. She was reading a book, but her attention frequently drifted to 2 children playing nearby. A boy with wild chestnut curls was climbing a tree, while a girl, slightly smaller and with the same curls, cheered him on. Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. He hadn't seen Claire in years, but there was no mistaking her. She looked different. Her once perfectly styled hair was now loosely tied back, and her designer wardrobe had been replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. Yet, there was a serenity about her that he didn't remember. And then his gaze shifted to the children. The boy leapt down from the tree, landing with a triumphant grin. His green eyes sparkled with mischief, and Ethan's heart stopped. Those eyes, they were identical to his own. Ethan felt as though the world had tilted on its axis. The realization hit him like a freight train. The boy and the girl, they couldn't be, could they? Before he could process the thought, Claire looked up. Their eyes met, and her face paled. She closed her book with a snap, her movements quick and deliberate as she stood. The children ran to her, their laughter fading as they noticed her sudden tension. "Mom," the boy asked, tugging on her sleeve. "It's time to go," Claire said, her voice steady but clipped. She took their hands, her movements calm but purposeful, and began walking toward the park exit. Ethan's feet felt rooted to the ground as he watched them disappear into the crowd. His mind raced with questions. How long had she been living here? Were those children his? Why hadn't she told him? He spent the rest of the day in a daze, replaying the scene over and over. That night, as he sat in his penthouse, the silence was deafening. The whiskey in his glass offered no comfort, and the skyline that once inspired him now felt like a hollow reminder of the life he had built. Grabbing his phone, Ethan did something he hadn't done in years. He scrolled through his contacts until he found her name, Claire Lockwood. His finger hovered over the call button, doubt gnawing at him. What would he even say? After everything, did he even have the right to demand answers? But as the memory of those green eyes burned in his mind, his resolve hardened. Taking a deep breath, he pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice, and then, hello. Her voice was cautious, clipped, and all too familiar. Claire, Ethan said, his voice faltering. It's me. There was a long pause, the silence stretching painfully. What do you want, Ethan? She asked finally, her tone colder than he expected. I saw you today, he said, the words tumbling out. In the park. Claire, we need to talk. I don't think we do, she replied sharply. You made your choice years ago. You know what I'm asking, Ethan said, his voice rising slightly. Are they? He couldn't bring himself to say the words. They're none of your concern, she said, cutting him off. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the slight tremor beneath it. You gave up that right when you walked away. Claire, please, Ethan pleaded. I just need to know the truth. There was another pause, heavier this time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer but resolute. The truth won't change anything, Ethan. Stay out of our lives. And with that, she ended the call. Ethan stared at the phone, her words ringing in his ears. He had built an empire, conquered every challenge thrown his way, but in this moment, he felt powerless. Yet deep down, he knew he couldn't let it end here. He couldn't walk away again, not this time. The next morning, Ethan found himself back in Claire's neighborhood, parked across the street from her apartment. He watched as she emerged with the two children, their backpacks slung over their shoulders. They laughed and chattered as she led them toward a nearby school. Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel as a wave of determination washed over him. He had spent years running from the past, but now it had caught up with him. And for the first time, he was ready to face it. The morning sun cast a soft glow over Claire's apartment as she hurried to get the kids ready for school. Liam was tugging at his sneakers, his tiny face scrunched in concentration, while Ella sat at the kitchen table, carefully coloring in her favorite book. Claire moved quickly between packing lunchboxes and brushing Ella's curls, her mind preoccupied. The phone call from Ethan the night before lingered in her thoughts. His voice, laced with something unfamiliar, regret perhaps, had stirred emotions she thought she had long buried. She hated how easily he could disrupt her carefully balanced world. For years, she had worked tirelessly to protect Liam and Ella, building a life for them that didn't include the man who had walked away when she needed him most. Mom, I can't find my backpack. Liam's voice jolted her back to reality. It's by the door, sweetheart, she called out, glancing at the clock. They were running late. She grabbed their things and ushered the kids out the door, her heart racing as she double-checked that everything was in place. The walk to school was their usual routine. The kids chatted about their plans for the day, oblivious to the weight Claire carried. As they reached the school gates, Liam and Ella kissed her goodbye and ran off to join their friends. Claire lingered for a moment, watching them disappear into the building. As she turned to leave, she caught sight of a familiar figure leaning against a sleek black car parked across the street. Her heart dropped. It was Ethan. Her steps faltered, and for a moment, she considered walking away, pretending she hadn't seen him. But something in his expression stopped her. He looked different, not the confident, untouchable man she remembered, but someone who seemed uncertain, vulnerable even. Taking a deep breath, she crossed the street and approached him. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I needed to see you," he said simply, his gaze steady. Claire folded her arms, her defenses rising. "I thought I made myself clear last night. We don't need you in our lives." "I know what you said," Ethan replied, his voice soft but firm. "But I can't just walk away from this, Claire. Those kids, are they mine?" Claire's jaw tightened. "What difference does it make, Ethan? You left. You made it clear what you wanted, and it wasn't us." "I made a mistake," Ethan said, his voice breaking slightly. "I see that now. But if they're my children, I deserve to know. And they deserve to know me." Claire's eyes flashed with anger. "You think it's that simple? You think you can just show up after all these years and claim a place in their lives?" "I'm not asking for anything," Ethan said quickly. "I just want the truth. Please, Claire." She stared at him, her emotions warring within her. Finally, she sighed and gestured toward a nearby coffee shop. "Fine, let's talk. But this doesn't change anything." Ethan followed her silently, his heart pounding. They settled into a corner table, the air between them thick with tension. Claire took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "Yes, Ethan," she said finally. "They're yours. Liam and Ella are your children." Ethan's breath caught. He had suspected it, but hearing the words made it real. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because you walked away," Claire said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and pain. "Do you have any idea what that was like for me? To watch you leave. To hear you say I wasn't enough, and then find out I was pregnant weeks later." Ethan's chest tightened as Claire continued, her voice rising. "I went to the first ultrasound alone, Ethan. I sat in that room and listened to their heartbeats without you. I spent sleepless nights wondering how I was going to raise 2 children on my own. And you know what kept me going? The thought that I didn't need you, that they didn't need you." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. "Claire, I didn't know. If I had." "What?" Claire interrupted. "You have come back out of pity, dragged us into your perfect little world so you could play the part of a father when it suited you." Ethan looked down, guilt washing over him. "I don't have an excuse for what I did. I was selfish. I was scared. And I hurt you in ways I can't take back. But I want to do better, Claire. I want to be there for them." Claire shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "It's not that simple, Ethan. They don't even know who you are. You can't just waltz into their lives and expect everything to fall into place." "I'm not expecting that," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be the father they deserve." Claire studied him for a long moment, her emotions churning. Finally, she nodded, though her expression remained guarded. "Liam's birthday is next week," she said quietly. "He's been asking for a bike, but I couldn't afford one this year. If you really want to show them you care, start there. But don't think for a second that this earns you a place in their lives. That's something you'll have to work for." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with determination. "Thank you, Claire. I won't let you down." As Claire stood to leave, Ethan remained seated, his mind racing. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. But he also knew this was only the beginning. If he wanted to be a part of Liam and Ella's lives, he would have to fight for it, and for Claire's trust. As he stepped out of the coffee shop and into the crisp autumn air, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about righting his wrongs. It was about building a future with the family he had nearly lost. The day of Liam's birthday arrived with an energy that Claire hadn't felt in years. Balloons and streamers decorated their small living room, the scent of freshly baked cupcakes filling the air. Ella was busy setting the table, her tiny hands carefully arranging plates and napkins, while Liam buzzed with excitement. His curly hair bounced as he darted around the room, unable to contain himself. "Mom, what's my big surprise?" Liam asked for the 5th time that morning, his green eyes wide with anticipation. "You'll see," Claire said with a smile, brushing a stray curl from his face. But beneath her cheerful exterior, her stomach churned. She hadn't told Liam that Ethan was coming. Not because she didn't want him to know, but because she wasn't sure if Ethan would follow through. The truth was, Claire didn't know what to expect from Ethan anymore. Their conversation at the coffee shop had been tense, raw, and filled with emotions she'd spent years trying to suppress. She wanted to believe him when he said he'd changed, but trust wasn't something she could give easily, not after everything they'd been through. At exactly 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. Claire froze for a moment, then wiped her hands on a dish towel and headed to the door. When she opened it, there he was, Ethan Lockwood, holding a shiny red bicycle with a big yellow bow tied to the handlebars. His usually confident demeanor was replaced with something she hadn't seen before: nervousness. "Hi," he said, his voice soft. "I hope I'm not too early." Claire's gaze flickered from the bike to Ethan's face. For a moment, she considered slamming the door, but then she thought of Liam's excitement and the promise she'd made. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Liam and Ella's faces lit up as they saw Ethan and the bike. "Whoa, is that for me?" Liam exclaimed, running over to inspect it. Ethan crouched down, smiling. "Happy birthday, Liam. I thought you might like it." Liam looked up at Claire, his expression full of hope. "Mom, can I ride it?" "Please." Claire hesitated, her eyes meeting Ethan's. She could see the sincerity in his face, the quiet plea for her to say yes. Finally, she nodded. "Go ahead, but stay on the sidewalk." "Thanks, Mom," Liam shouted as he ran outside with the bike. Ella followed, clapping her hands excitedly. The apartment fell silent as the sound of the children's laughter drifted in from the street. Claire turned to Ethan, her arms crossed. "You kept your promise. I wasn't sure you would." "I'm not the same man I was, Claire," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I know I have a lot to prove, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Claire leaned against the kitchen counter, her eyes narrowing. "Do you have any idea what it's been like? Raising 2 kids on my own, watching them grow up without a father." Ethan looked down, guilt washing over him. "I can't imagine how hard it's been, and I'm sorry. I should have been there. I should have stayed." "You think saying sorry makes up for 4 years of absence?" Claire's voice cracked, her anger boiling to the surface. "I've spent sleepless nights worrying about how to make ends meet, about whether I was enough for them. And now you show up with a bike and think that fixes everything." Ethan took a deep breath, his hands gripping the edge of the counter. "I don't think it fixes anything, Claire. I just want a chance to be in their lives. I want to make things right." Claire's gaze softened slightly, though her guard remained firmly in place. "Do you even know what they're like? What makes them laugh? Their favorite bedtime stories? Being a father isn't about showing up when it's convenient, Ethan. It's about being there every single day." "I know," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "And I want to be that for them. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Claire. I'm asking for the opportunity to earn it." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of Liam and Ella laughing outside filled the silence, a bittersweet reminder of the life Ethan had missed. Finally, Claire sighed and ran a hand through her hair. "Liam adores dinosaurs," she said quietly. "Ella loves butterflies and anything that sparkles. They both love pancakes on Saturday mornings, and they can't go to bed without hearing a story. Those are the things that matter, Ethan. Not money, not grand gestures. Just showing up." Ethan nodded, his chest tightening at the glimpse into their world. "Thank you for telling me," he said softly. "I want to learn everything about them. And I'll show up, Claire. Every day, if you let me." Claire's eyes searched his face, looking for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was a man who seemed genuinely remorseful, someone who was trying to piece together the broken shards of their past. "We'll see," she said finally. "But don't think for a second that I'm letting my guard down. I won't let them get hurt." "I understand," Ethan said. "And I won't let you down." As they stood there, the sound of the door opening drew their attention. Liam came running in, his face flushed with excitement. "Mom, I rode all the way to the end of the block. This is the best birthday ever." Claire smiled, ruffling his curls. "I'm glad you had fun, sweetheart." Liam turned to Ethan, his eyes shining. "Thanks for the bike, mister." Ethan crouched down, smiling. "You're welcome, Liam. And you can call me Ethan." Liam nodded, then ran back outside to join Ella. Claire watched them go, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She glanced at Ethan, who was still crouched by the door, watching the children with a look of awe. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for him to be the father Liam and Ella deserved. Ethan spent the week after Liam's birthday reflecting on every moment he'd missed over the last 4 years. Each laugh, every scraped knee, and all the small milestones he should have been there for now weighed heavily on his heart. But for the first time in years, he didn't let the guilt consume him. Instead, he used it as fuel to start rebuilding. He began with small gestures. The day after the birthday party, Ethan stopped by a local bookstore and picked out 2 books he thought the twins might like. One about dinosaurs for Liam and another about butterflies for Ella. The cashier smiled as she rang him up, commenting on how lucky his kids were. Ethan had simply nodded, though the words struck a deep chord. That evening, he found himself standing outside Claire's apartment again, clutching the books in his hand. He knocked, his heart racing, as he waited for the door to open. Claire answered, her expression guarded. "Ethan," she said, her voice neutral. "What are you doing here?" "I brought something for Liam and Ella," he said, holding up the books. Claire hesitated, glancing at the gifts. For a moment, Ethan thought she might turn him away. But then she stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. "They're finishing dinner," she said. "You can give it to them before bed." The living room was cozy and cluttered with signs of life. Crayons scattered on the coffee table, a pile of laundry folded neatly on the couch, and framed pictures of the twins on the walls. It was a stark contrast to Ethan's sterile penthouse, and he felt an ache of longing for the warmth he had been missing. "Mom, who's here?" Liam's voice called from the kitchen. Moments later, he and Ella appeared, their faces lighting up when they saw Ethan. "Ethan," Liam said excitedly. "Did you bring another bike?" Ethan chuckled, crouching to their level. "Not this time, buddy. But I did bring something I think you'll like." He handed Liam the dinosaur book and Ella the one about butterflies. Ella's eyes widened as she ran her fingers over the glittery cover. "It sparkles," she exclaimed, hugging the book to her chest. Liam flipped through his book, his face serious as he studied the colorful illustrations. "Do you know all these dinosaurs, Ethan?" "I might need you to teach me a few," Ethan admitted, smiling. "Can you read it to us?" Ella asked, her voice soft but hopeful. Ethan glanced at Claire, silently asking for permission. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Okay," she said, "but only one story. It's bedtime soon." The twins scrambled onto the couch, leaving just enough space for Ethan to sit between them. He opened the book, his voice steady as he began to read. Liam and Ella leaned in close, their eyes wide with wonder. For Ethan, the moment felt surreal. He had spent years chasing success, yet nothing compared to the feeling of reading to his children for the first time. When the story ended, Liam yawned and stretched, while Ella rested her head against Ethan's arm. "That was the best story ever," Liam declared. "Can you come back tomorrow and read more?" Ella asked, her voice drowsy. Ethan's throat tightened as he looked at Claire, who stood silently in the doorway, her arms crossed. "We'll see," she said, her tone cautious but not dismissive. Ethan nodded, gently shifting Ella back to the couch as he stood. "Good night, you two," he said, his voice soft. As Claire tucked the kids into bed, Ethan waited in the living room, unsure if she would let him stay or ask him to leave. When she returned, she gestured for him to sit. "I'll admit," Claire said, sitting across from him, "they've taken a liking to you faster than I expected." "I'm grateful for that," Ethan replied. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm going to do everything I can to be the father they need." Claire studied him for a long moment. "They don't understand the full story, Ethan. Right now, they just see someone who's kind and brings them gifts. But one day, they'll have questions. And when that day comes, I need to know that you'll be honest with them, even if it makes you look bad." "I will," Ethan said firmly. "They deserve the truth, no matter what." Claire nodded, though her expression remained cautious. "This isn't just about the kids, Ethan. It's about consistency. You've shown up twice now. But what happens when work gets busy? When something more important comes along?" "Nothing is more important than them," Ethan said, his voice unwavering. "I'll cancel meetings, reschedule deals, do whatever it takes. I'm not going to disappear again, Claire. Not ever." For the first time, Claire's guard seemed to drop just slightly. "I hope that's true," she said quietly. "Because if you let them down, I don't know if I can pick up the pieces again." Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. "I won't let them down," he promised. As he left the apartment that night, Ethan felt a strange mix of hope and fear. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was walking towards something meaningful. The next day, he cleared his schedule entirely, dedicating the time to researching schools, parks, and activities for the twins. He wanted to be ready for any opportunity to spend time with them, no matter how small. That evening, he called Claire. "I was wondering if I could take Liam and Ella to the park tomorrow," he asked, his voice hesitant. Claire was silent for a moment before replying. "Fine," she said, "but I'm coming too. I want to make sure they're comfortable." Ethan smiled, relieved. "Thank you, Claire. I'll pick you up at noon." As he hung up, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in years, his life wasn't about climbing higher or achieving more. It was about earning the trust of the people who mattered most. The sun shone brightly as Ethan arrived at the park the next day, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and nerves. The twins' laughter was already echoing in the distance, a sound that had quickly become the highlight of his days. Claire stood nearby, her arms crossed as she watched the children climb on the jungle gym. Her presence was a silent reminder that this was a trial, not a triumph. She was here to observe, to ensure he followed through on his promises. Ethan walked toward them, carrying a small picnic basket he had carefully packed that morning. It felt strange, domestic even, to do something so simple, yet it brought him a surprising sense of pride. Liam spotted him first and jumped down from the jungle gym. "Ethan, did you bring more books?" "Not today, buddy," Ethan said, kneeling as Liam ran into his arms. "But I did bring snacks. Think you can handle that?" "Snacks are the best," Liam declared, tugging on Ethan's hand. "Come on, Ella. Ethan's here." Ella, ever the cautious one, climbed down more slowly, brushing her dress clean before walking over. She gave Ethan a small smile. "Hi, Ethan," she said softly. "Hi, Ella," Ethan replied, smiling warmly. "I brought something special for you too. Remember how you said you like butterflies?" Ella's eyes lit up as Ethan pulled a small, colorful kite from the basket. It was shaped like a butterfly, its vibrant wings fluttering in the breeze. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed, her shyness melting away as she reached for it. "Let's see how high we can make it fly," Ethan said, standing up and handing her the kite. Liam grabbed it excitedly, and together, they ran to the open field. Claire watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. Ethan could feel her gaze on him as he joined the twins, helping them get the kite airborne. Liam ran ahead, holding the string tightly, while Ella laughed and clapped as the kite soared higher. For Ethan, the moment felt like a small victory, a glimpse of the life he hoped to build with them. After a while, they settled on a blanket for the picnic. Ethan unpacked sandwiches, fruit, and juice boxes, earning cheers from the kids. As they ate, Liam regaled Ethan with tales of his favorite dinosaurs, while Ella shyly showed off her butterfly drawings. Claire sat quietly nearby, occasionally glancing at Ethan with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. When the kids ran off to play again, Claire finally spoke. "They're happy today," she said, her voice measured. "I'm glad," Ethan replied. "That's all I want, to make them happy." Claire sighed, her gaze fixed on the children. "It's easy to show up when everything is fun and exciting, Ethan. But what about when things get hard? When they're sick or scared or struggling with school? Are you ready for that?" Ethan turned to her, his expression serious. "I know I've missed a lot, Claire, and I know there's nothing I can do to make up for it. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Whatever they need, I'll be there." Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. "You say that now, but you don't know what it's like. Raising two kids isn't just about picnics and kites. It's exhausting and messy, and sometimes it feels like you're failing no matter how hard you try." Ethan hesitated, her words hitting him harder than he expected. "You're right," he admitted. "I don't know what it's like, but I want to learn. I want to be a real father to them, not just someone who shows up when it's convenient." Claire studied him for a long moment, her defenses still firmly in place. "We'll see," she said finally. "Actions speak louder than words, Ethan, and it's going to take more than a few good days to convince me." Ethan nodded, accepting the challenge. "I'll prove it, Claire, to you and to them." The afternoon passed quickly, filled with laughter and small moments that felt monumental to Ethan. He helped Liam climb a particularly tricky part of the jungle gym, cheered as Ella managed to fly the kite by herself, and even caught Claire smiling once or twice. As the sun began to set, Claire called the kids over. "Time to head home," she said, holding their jackets out. Do we have to?" Liam whined. "Yes, you do," Claire replied firmly. "But if you're good, maybe Ethan can visit again soon." The kids cheered, and Ethan's heart swelled at the thought. He helped them pack up the blanket and picnic basket, savoring every moment. When they reached the apartment, Claire sent the kids inside to wash up while she lingered at the door. "Thank you," she said quietly, her tone softening. "For today, you don't have to thank me," Ethan said. "It was my privilege." "They're amazing, Claire. You've done an incredible job with them." Claire's lips twitched into a small smile. "They're my world," she said simply. "They're becoming mine too," Ethan replied, his voice filled with quiet determination. Claire hesitated, then nodded. "We'll see how serious you are. But for now, you're doing okay." Ethan chuckled, taking the small compliment as a win. "I'll take it," he said. As he walked back to his car, Ethan felt a deep sense of satisfaction. For the first time in years, his life had meaning beyond boardrooms and business deals. He was beginning to understand what it truly meant to be a father, and he was ready to fight for the chance to keep proving it. That night, as he lay in bed, Ethan stared at the ceiling, replaying the day's events in his mind. He knew the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. Ethan arrived at Claire's apartment on a rainy Saturday morning, holding a small bouquet of daisies for Ella and a dinosaur puzzle for Liam. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, breakthroughs, and challenges, but he felt like he was finally making progress. The twins had begun to warm up to him, and even Claire's walls seemed to be cracking, bit by bit. When the door opened, Liam's face lit up. "Ethan, you're here." "Of course I am, buddy," Ethan said, kneeling to ruffle Liam's hair. "I promised, didn't I?" Ella peeked around the corner, her eyes lighting up when she saw the bouquet. "Are those for me?" she asked shyly. "They are," Ethan said, handing her the flowers. "Every butterfly deserves a garden, right?" Ella giggled, clutching the daisies tightly, as she ran to get a vase. Claire appeared in the doorway, her expression neutral, but not unfriendly. "You're early," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "I figured I'd get a head start on the day," Ethan replied, holding up the puzzle. "Thought this might keep Liam busy while the rain clears." Liam grabbed the box, his eyes wide. "This is so cool. Can we do it together?" "You bet," Ethan said, following him to the living room. For the next hour, the three of them worked on the puzzle, with Ethan letting Liam take the lead while Ella added pieces here and there. Claire stayed in the kitchen, pretending to busy herself, but occasionally glancing at them with a small smile. When the rain finally stopped, Ethan suggested a walk to the nearby park. Claire hesitated, but eventually agreed, bundling the kids in their jackets before they headed out. The park was quiet, the damp grass glistening in the afternoon light. Liam ran ahead, chasing after Squirrel, while Ella held Ethan's hand tightly. Claire walked beside them, her arms crossed, as if trying to shield herself from the vulnerability creeping in. As they reached a small pond, Ethan crouched beside Ella, pointing out a group of ducks paddling by. "You see the one with the green head? That's called a mallard," he said. Ella nodded seriously, her eyes wide. "Do they live here?" "They do," Ethan said, "but they'll fly south for the winter soon. They're smarter than me. They know how to avoid the cold." Ella giggled, and Claire couldn't help but smile at the sight. For a moment, the tension between her and Ethan seemed to dissolve, replaced by something softer. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the park, with Ethan taking every opportunity to bond with the twins. He taught Liam how to skip stones across the pond, helped Ella gather leaves for a craft project, and even convinced Claire to take a group photo, something she hadn't done in years. By the time they returned to the apartment, the kids were exhausted but happy, their laughter still ringing in Ethan's ears. "Go wash up for dinner," Claire told them as they kicked off their shoes. Once they were out of earshot, she turned to Ethan, her expression serious. "You're doing well with them," she admitted, her voice measured. "But this isn't just about being fun, Ethan. They need stability. They need to know you'll be there when things aren't perfect." "I know," Ethan said, "and I will be. Whatever they need, whenever they need it." Claire studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Let's see how you handle a real challenge," she said, her tone almost teasing. "Ella's school has a parent-teacher night next week. It's important to her and Liam too. Think you can make it?" Ethan's heart swelled at the thought of being included in such a meaningful event. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," he said. The following week, Ethan found himself standing in the brightly decorated hallway of Ella's school, feeling more nervous than he had during any business meeting. He smoothed his jacket, glancing at Claire for reassurance. She offered a small, encouraging smile. Inside the classroom, Ethan was introduced to Ella's teacher, a kind woman who spoke highly of Ella's creativity and curiosity. As they moved around the room, Ella proudly showed him her artwork, her tiny hand gripping his tightly. "Look, Ethan, that's my butterfly picture," she said, pointing to a colorful drawing on the wall. "It's beautiful, Ella," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're so talented." Liam, not wanting to be left out, dragged Ethan over to a bulletin board displaying the class's favorite dinosaurs. "That's mine," he said, pointing to a drawing of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Ethan crouched beside him, studying the picture. "That's amazing, Liam. I didn't know you were such a great artist." Claire watched from a distance, her heart conflicted. Seeing Ethan so present, so engaged with the twins, was stirring feelings she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge in years. As the evening ended, Ella hugged Ethan tightly. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Ethan hugged her back, his chest tightening. "I wouldn't have missed it, sweetheart," he said softly. Back at the apartment, after the kids were asleep, Claire sat across from Ethan at the kitchen table. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. "You did well tonight," she said finally, her voice quiet. "Thank you," Ethan replied, It meant a lot to me to be there. Claire nodded, her gaze dropping to the table. I'm still not sure if I can trust you, Ethan. But the kids, they're starting to. I know I have a lot to prove, Ethan said, his voice steady. And I'm ready for the long haul, Claire. Whatever it takes. For the first time, Claire allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, Ethan was telling the truth. As he left that night, Ethan felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. He wasn't just rebuilding his relationship with the twins. He was earning the chance to be part of their family. Ethan parked his car outside Claire's apartment, staring at the building for a moment before stepping out. The late autumn air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves, and the sky was streaked with shades of orange and pink. Today felt different, not just because he was picking up Liam and Ella for their first official outing with him alone, but because it marked the culmination of weeks of effort. Effort to rebuild, to show Claire and the kids that he was here for the long haul. He knocked on the door, and it opened almost immediately. Liam and Ella stood there, bundled in their jackets, their faces alight with excitement. "Ethan," Liam shouted, throwing his arms around him. "We're ready." Ella chimed in, clutching her small butterfly-shaped backpack. Claire appeared behind them, holding their hats and gloves. "Don't let the excitement fool you," she said, handing the items to Ethan. "They're a handful." "I can handle it," Ethan replied, smiling at her. "We'll be back by 6. Claire nodded, her expression a mixture of trust and lingering caution. "Call me if anything comes up." Ethan knelt, helping Ella adjust her scarf. "You two ready for some fun?" "Yeah," they cheered in unison, and with a final wave to Claire, they headed out. Their first stop was the local science museum, a place Ethan had researched meticulously after learning about Liam's love of dinosaurs. The moment they entered, Liam's eyes grew wide at the towering skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. "Whoa!" he exclaimed, running ahead to get a closer look. Ethan stayed close, listening intently as Liam rattled off facts about the dinosaur, his enthusiasm infectious. "Did you know T-Rexes had teeth as long as bananas?" Liam asked, looking up at Ethan with wide eyes. "I didn't, but now I do," Ethan said, laughing. "You're a dinosaur expert, Liam." Ella tugged on his sleeve, pointing to a nearby exhibit. "Can we go there next?" she asked, her voice soft but eager. "Of course," Ethan said, taking her hand as they moved toward a display of butterflies. Ella's face lit up as she studied the vibrant specimens, her small fingers tracing the glass. "They're so pretty," she whispered. "They are," Ethan agreed, "but not as pretty as the drawings you showed me last week." Ella beamed, leaning against him as they moved to the next exhibit. For hours, they explored the museum, with Ethan letting the kids lead the way. He answered their questions, joined in their excitement, and soaked in every moment. When they stopped for lunch in the museum cafe, Ethan pulled out a small notebook and handed it to Liam. "What's this?" Liam asked, flipping through the pages. "It's a dinosaur journal," Ethan explained. "You can write down everything you learn about dinosaurs, and we can read it together next time." Liam's face lit up. "This is awesome. Thanks, Ethan." Ethan turned to Ella, handing her a small sketch pad and colored pencils. "And this is for your butterfly drawings." Ella hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Ethan." "You're welcome," he said, his chest tightening with emotion. Their next stop was the park, where the kids raced to the swings while Ethan pushed them, their laughter filling the crisp afternoon air. Afterward, they built leaf piles, jumping in them until they were covered in golden hues. As the sun began to set, Ethan gathered them on a bench, pulling out a thermos of hot chocolate he had packed. They sat together, sipping the warm drink, their cheeks flushed from the cool air. "This was the best day ever," Liam declared, leaning against Ethan. Ella nodded, her head resting on Ethan's arm. "Can we do this again soon?" "Absolutely," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Whenever you want." When they returned to Claire's apartment, the kids were bubbling with excitement, recounting every detail of their day. Claire listened patiently, her eyes occasionally flicking to Ethan with a mixture of gratitude and surprise. After the kids were tucked into bed, Claire joined Ethan in the living room. She sat across from him, her hands clasped in her lap. "They had a good time," she said, breaking the silence. "They're amazing," Ethan replied. "Thank you for letting me take them today." Claire nodded, her gaze dropping to her hands. "I'll admit, I didn't think you'd make it this far," she said quietly. "But you're proving me wrong." Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady. "I know I can't undo the past, Claire, but I'm trying to build something better for the future. For them. And for you, if you'll let me." Claire looked up, her eyes filled with emotion. "It's not easy for me to trust, Ethan. But the kids, they adore you. And I can see how much you care about them." "I love them," Ethan said simply. "And I want to be here for them. For all of you." Claire hesitated, then nodded. "One step at a time," she said, her voice soft. Ethan smiled, relief washing over him. "That's all I'm asking for." As Ethan left the apartment that night, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The road ahead would still be challenging, but for the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. A family. Walking to his car, Ethan looked up at the night sky, the stars twinkling above. He didn't need the city skyline or the accolades of his career to feel accomplished. He had everything he needed in Liam, Ella, and Claire. And for the first time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. And now, I want to hear from you. Which part of this story touched your heart the most? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. And of course, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more narratives like this. Each subscription helps us continue bringing exciting stories to you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.